Hi everyone. As part of this kind of, let's call it working from home and change in the normal way of working, I'm running a series where I'm talking to clients about how their business and indeed how they're getting their team to cope with these changes. So with me today, I've got Kate Beattie. Kate's the Finance Director for Endeavour Group. And thanks for joining us, Kate.
No problem, Greg.
No worries. Now, Kate, can you just give us a brief overview of your business and what you do? Because you've got, I guess, a tale of two halves, I think, a story of two halves.
Yeah, so we're the drinks part of the Woolworths groups, and so within that we have a large set of retail businesses. The ones that people will be most familiar with are Dan Murphy's and BWS. But also possibly slightly lesser known is we've just merged that retail drinks part of the business with the ALH hotels group. Mm-hmm. So we also operate 330 hotels around the country. So of course, having coronavirus hit us has meant kind of two quite distinct things. One is we've had to close the entire hotels business, which has been dealing with a massive challenge around obviously team and making sure that the well-being of our team is looked after, as well as the logistics of closing down all of those hotels. And on the other hand, we've had the retail drinks side boom. So just slightly after panic buying for toilet paper started in supermarkets, we saw something a bit similar start in relation to alcoholic beverages.
Yeah, we were definitely alcohol before toilet paper in our house, but
yeah, there were a few people proudly posting shots of themselves on social media, stockpiling their beverages, which is obviously not necessarily from a responsible consumption perspective what we want. And in fact, in response, the whole retail drinks industry self-imposed limits on what we would sell in single transactions for a period of time to try and stop that kind of panic, stockpiling, and all the negative potential social consequences that would cause. So we went through dealing with that massive growth in demand, and also, of course, as happened across the retail industry, a massive shift to e-commerce. Yeah. So significantly higher, on one day we had over a 200% growth in the volume of transactions we were doing online, which meant all sorts of difficult things for our logistics. So just fulfilling that volume of orders online, getting the supply working both to store and to customers' homes for a period of time was causing us challenges in all directions.
Yeah, correct. And as a business culturally, obviously you've got the business that is booming, or two parts of the business that are booming, one part that's in absolute, there's not more lockdown that you could be in. How's the business and the business leaders balancing that and keeping everyone motivated?
Yeah, well, I think times of crisis often drive a great deal of coming together. Mm-hmm. So we've certainly felt, and I think this is true right across the Woolworths group, that the need to respond urgently to all sorts of demands. I mean, topmost, of course, being safety and well-being of our teams, of our customers, and of the across the operating environment we work in. But in addition to that, that extended into making sure that vulnerable customers were still able to access their basic needs from a supermarket's point of view. And then in drinks, obviously, that's not so much about basic needs, but it is about ensuring that people can still access the products that they want. I think that the need to respond at scale across the organisation to challenges in every direction of the business created a great deal of coming together and a great deal of alignment around purpose, priority. We were very proudly in the drinks part of the business able to help the supermarket. So we had, we've redeployed a lot of our hotels team members into supermarkets as well as into the rest of the drinks business. We had, where we had attached BWS stores to supermarkets, we operated with the attached supermarket to close down or reduce the hours of the BWS store so that our team members could support the supermarket team to get essential stock back onto the shelves for our customers. So we had like daily, crisis management, emergency response style of meetings right across the leadership of all of the businesses in the group to agree what needed to be done, what the priority order was and where our resources most needed to be directed.
Yeah, gotcha.
And so I think that the sense in doing that we were genuinely able to harness our best energy to be, the best we can be together was really quite wonderful and something that we're now contemplating, how do we hold on to going forward?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how we're going to come out of this and whether people's roles evolve to more about not focusing on your silo, but focusing on the bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Tell me from a kind of a leadership perspective, and obviously looking after finance, did you have to make changes on the focus of finance? Were there any things that you sat there and thought, wow, this is quite a big shift from what we've traditionally done?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest obvious example for us, I mean, we certainly had the example of everyone moving to work from home, which everyone has experienced. But like most businesses, as we started our journey of working from home and as we entered kind of the crisis mode, we were in the midst of doing budgets. And
Mm-hmm.
budgets are normally a relatively BAU activity where you have a fairly good level of understanding of what's going to be happening in the following year. You've got some decent projections of income growth and what you need to do on the cost side. And all of a sudden, all of those assumptions were out the window.
Mm-hmm.
And they were out the window and changing daily. So as part of our coming together as a group to try and navigate what we were dealing with, a lot of time was spent across the finance community working with the business, actually doing scenario planning.
Yeah.
So it was no longer about what's our steady state single view of next year going to be and how does that translate into a budget. It was actually, what are the sort of 5 different scenarios that we think we might be operating in literally within weeks, and how do we be ready to respond to all of those, and ultimately what do they mean for us financially and what do we need to be managing. So we had to become very flexible.
Yeah.
And very able to move in any direction in real time. And that was most relevant as the shutdown scenarios were getting tighter. So as hotels closed and as we moved into a retail environment where it wasn't clear how much of retail was going to be able to stay open.
Yeah.
So a lot of planning at that stage as to how we would navigate next steps. And now, of course, the inverse is happening, and we're talking about what does re-emerging look like? At what pace what parts of the business start to return to normal, and what does normal look like? Yeah, and again, that means inevitably that the budgeting process is very much an assumption-driven process.
Yeah.
And we know that as fast as we make assumptions, they'll change as we learn more things about what are we re-emerging into.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with people that are working for you, obviously they're busy modelling, forecasting, dealing with the business on assumptions, keeping them focused, because obviously there's lots of white noise around all the other things that are happening at the moment. How have you guys been able to keep people on task, making sure that they're supported, but also feel like they're contributing and that the world's not shutting down?
Yeah, I think, I'm immensely proud of what the team's been able to achieve, but we certainly increased the routines of checking in. So my finance team is distributed across the country. So between the hotels business, Dan Murphy's based in Melbourne, and then we have manufacturing businesses based in the Barossa and so on. So we quite quickly moved to, within those individual teams, they started meeting every day on video conferences to just check in and understand a combination of checking in and making sure that work priorities were understood, but also making sure that people were okay. Yeah. Because obviously, as we all moved to working from home, for some people that was quite seamless, but for others, they were suddenly juggling, 2 parents at home trying to work full time while managing children who couldn't be at school, and all of the challenges associated with that. And we were really conscious of what that might do to people's well-being. Yeah. So we instigated check-ins across the group to make sure that we were well connected to how people were going. Mm-hmm. And that also we were, spending time, I guess, if anything, over communicating. Where are we at? What are we trying to do next? What are the priorities? When are they? When are we trying to do what by? How are we coming together to do that? And that's required, as I'm sure most people have experienced, a lot of time actually spent in really deliberate levels of connection over video conference, sharing documents live, all of that kind of thing. Yeah. I've never felt like people have not been clear about what needs to be done. I think actually the challenge for us has been, there's been an overwhelming amount of things needing to be done very quickly.
And from a learnings perspective and things that you kind of went, wow, why haven't we done this before? Is there anything, are there any take homes that this has brought about for you guys?
I think the ability to work remotely well has just completely stepped up a notch. We had always had automatically video conference dial-in option available for every calendar invite we set up. But now it's expected, of course, that you're dialing in by video conference, and we always expect that people have the cameras on unless they need not to. We understand that there are circumstances where you don't, but we're much more deliberate and careful about the connection we create online. And I think that will mean actually ways of working we had before just won't need to be there anymore. So we were doing a lot of travel around the country to have face-to-face meetings. And I think it's pretty much accepted in the business now that we've proven to ourselves that that's not necessary, that actually we can be very effective if we're more deliberate about doing remote connection well.
Yeah.
And I'd say some teams have reflected back to me that actually they feel more connected now across the country than they did before, because when you're in an office environment, inevitably you look to the people who are in the same physical space as you to be the people that you talk to and communicate with and so on. Whereas now, actually, you have to think about who should I be talking to and communicating with, and that extends people's reach more broadly than they might normally have thought to previously. So I think for us as a distributed finance community, it's been a real positive.
Yeah, and you as a leader, have you found these times? Have you found it tougher than normal? Do you sit there and go, because you're obviously missing that face to face, the touch and physicality of seeing people? Have you found it tougher?
Yeah, I would say so. I think the hardest thing is when you're talking to people in just this one dimension of a video conference. It's much harder to get a genuine read on whether people are okay. Like I definitely miss the coffee catch-ups. I miss the corridor conversations. There is something that does feel harder. And also I think the days have become generally longer days of genuinely back-to-back video conferencing, which means actually getting time to sit back and think and pause to reflect on how am I showing up as a leader and who do I need to connect with has been just a little bit harder. I know I've made notes for myself to call people, and it's taken me 2 or 3 days to actually be able to make the call, literally physically, because it's blocked by the amount of things that are somehow being squished into the day.
Yeah, great. And has that meant that from a time management perspective, have you become a lot more structured? So if you're having a conference, is there an agenda? How do you make sure that you're not wasting your time?
I don't think we've done anything better on the agenda front. It's a good point. We've always said we could be better at being clear about the purpose of meetings. I think I'm more careful about which meetings I choose to attend, because there's been a lot of overlapping ones, and making sure that the ones I attend are the ones I need to be on for various reasons. I don't think I've actually become better at time management. If anything, for a while, my challenge was the extent to which work was slipping into personal, particularly when you're in the same physical environment, and switching from one to the other just means walking out a door. It's quite hard not to walk back through the door and keep going. Yeah. So I've had to be quite deliberate with my family. I've got 2 young adult children living with me, and we collectively have made commitments to each other to be quite deliberate about spending time with each other, particularly, around dinner or playing games after dinner and that kind of thing, because otherwise we could all end up spending our entire life sitting on computers.
Oh, it's funny. We did a seminar this morning and we're talking around, although you're working from home and surrounded by friends, or not friends, but family, how lonely it can be at times, because you kind of got this nagging thing that I'm still at work, but I'm at home, and just trying to find your place and making sure that you spend quality time together is challenging. We've banned the news, so we kind of are very focused on looking at good news stories at the moment. We have to talk about the 2 best things that happened to you today. Usually it's Dad, you leaving the room for a while, but we've tried to keep the language a lot more positive than negative. There's so much negativity out there.
Oh yeah, definitely. We're playing games most evenings after dinner, and it's just trying to find making sure we have time where you're just relaxing and having fun with each other, not feeling serious and feeling overwhelmed and all the other things that can naturally happen in an environment like this.
Yeah. Hey, what's your view on with finance in general? And because obviously a lot of these roles, the visibility around what people do and productivity, I think is probably a bit more apparent, because you can actually see whether you've needed something or whether a role's been a luxury. Do you think we'll see more streamlined teams when we come out of this, or do you think we'll just go back to normal?
It's a good question. I think, it's probably partly the industry we're in, because we have been so super busy, because a lot of our normal finance routines just got turned on their head. I think, if anything, we felt like we don't have enough rather than we've got too many. I think the interesting question is going to be, what has that pressure put on us now revealed to us about, I certainly have had a lot of conversations with team members about how much more urgent fixing inefficiencies in the way we work has now become. So we can really feel them now that we're trying to do things remotely, and it's just there's a little bit more friction in getting things done. it makes the things that were a bit painful previously feel extraordinarily painful.
Yeah, gotcha.
So I think there's a heightened sense of, well, when we get the opportunity, we now have quite a firm list of things we're just going to go after fixing as fast as we can, because we need to remove these pain points.
Yeah, absolutely. So you think there'll be a bit out of this, there'll be a big focus on making sure that systems and process controls are
exactly
best off.
And automation opportunities are taken. You know, there's things where it's just taken us too long to turn around key information, and it's not because of anyone not doing the right thing. It's just, you know, things that we always knew were a bit hard for us to do have just felt super hard.
Yeah, gotcha. And with all this scenario modelling then and crystal gazing or crystal ball gazing, have you got a view on when you think things, I don't think things will be back to normality for a while, but this new version of normality, do you guys have a feel for that?
Look, of course, it's a topic we're debating all the time. Our hopeful view is, and we are starting to see it, so, you know, hotels in the Northern Territory have just been given the green light to start to open back up. So our hopeful view of the world, I guess, is that hotels or on-premise hospitality will start to open up from about July. Mm-hmm. But of course, without a vaccine being available and without mass immunity in the community, we expect social distancing measures to be quite restrictive for an extended period, and it's anybody's guess as to how long that'll be. So we don't expect the new operating environment to mean everybody's back into the physical environments that they were before. We're planning for a gradual reintroduction of people into the corporate offices, but at a significantly reduced volume of people at any point in time.
Yeah.
We certainly plan to keep open the option to work from home or work from other locations, and particularly for vulnerable team members or people who feel insecure about physically the physical safety aspects of being in bigger environments.
Yeah.
And then the rest, you know, I think we're pretty much aligned with the broader economic view, which is it's going to be a pretty tough, gradual economic recovery, particularly while we don't have a vaccine and while it takes some time for sort of the economic drivers of the economy to start to return to previous normal. Without international tourism, without the ability to travel freely and without the ability to gather freely, there's so many parts of the economy that are going to be impacted for an extended period of time that it's really hard to make a call as to when we're genuinely going to have done the full bounce back. Yeah,
correct. Yeah, I think there's so many things at play at the moment, and I think obviously, international. I think we're going to become a lot nationalised than globalised, because you can't open your borders at the moment. Yeah.
I guess.
Sorry, you go.
No, I was going to say, I guess that is the hope, right? That we can get the infection levels down low enough that at least domestically we can start to return to some level of normal around things like, starting up sporting events and things like that again. Otherwise, it's going to feel very constrained.
Yeah, correct. And look, I really appreciate your time. I guess, are there any do you have 3 pieces of wisdom for anyone out there from what you've found? What you would say, hey, that's kept you either focused on task, is keeping you motivated, or just helping you cope?
I think, these things are always personal, right? But for me personally, the plus about this whole new way of working has been that I can do my morning run every day. So I get out with the dog every morning. I've been giving myself a 3.5-minute daily plank challenge. So I've got abs of steel.
Yeah.
So I think that having that, the starting the day in a way that makes me feel personally positive every day has been a really big plus. Actually, I've mastered the art of getting ready for work in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And being on the conference call just very shortly after finishing the daily run. So I think, for me, it's always been important, and even more so probably when the world feels a bit shaky, to have routines that make me feel good. And so my personal piece of advice, I guess, is to have that and anchor to it, and try to keep it going no matter what else is going on around you, and no matter how overwhelming things can be.
Yeah, fantastic.
I guess I probably don't have 3. The second one is, again, probably the same as most people, but it's make sure that there are opportunities in the day for connections that aren't just about work, and that and then when you are having connections that are about work, you're still creating time to have a conversation that's more personal than just here's the task that needs to be done, so that the whole environment you're operating in and working in still feels human.
Mhm.
It's even more important when everything's done via screens and phone calls. It's the humanity still needs to be very deliberately reintroduced all the time.
Correct. Yeah, it's hard, that whole, yeah, the physicality I find really hard. And that whole separation, and we were talking about it earlier, just the screen fatigue of looking at yourself for so long, you're like, oh my God.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And
Yeah.
being in the same physical space all the time, not you've got to keep creating some degree of mixing it up and changing it and
Yeah.
refreshing. Otherwise, I think it can really get you down. But on the other hand, there's so much to be, it's also a great time to reflect and feel grateful. Now more than ever, I think it's safe to say we feel like we're in the lucky country, and that feels pretty amazing. And particularly, I appreciate that not everyone's in the same boat, but particularly for people like me, I feel like I'm in a lucky industry. Yes, we've had our pros and cons, but overall, we're going to get through it with a relatively high level of resilience, I think. And
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing the whole economy start to get back on its feet as fast as possible.
Absolutely. And it seems most clients I'm speaking to, obviously it depends on sector. So if you're in hospitality, travel, education, you're pretty quiet at the moment. But the resources guys, logistics, retail, FMCG, they're all really busy. And it's just an interesting dynamic. But funnily enough, they're all going through the same challenges. And I think we're all new at it. But it's interesting that people are approaching it. And to me, it's as much mental about keeping positivity and making sure, as you said, the 3.5 minute plank on your elbows or straight armed.
No elbows.
Oh yeah.
I can't do the straight armed.
But having those little goals is what sets you up, I think, for success. Yeah. So anyway,
small wins.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's all you're looking for. As long as they're wins, it doesn't matter how small they are. But Kate, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for sharing your views on where we're going. And, I can't wait to go and have a beer at one of your pubs.
Yeah, me too.
Totally. Thanks, Kate.